Hello, I'm State Controller Tom DiNapoli, and welcome to our conversation commemorating Black History Month. I'm really delighted to have a very special guest for this conversation, Congresswoman Yvette Clarke. Congresswoman, thanks for joining us.
Let me thank you, Mr. Controller Tom DiNapoli, for kicking off this Black History Month series with an interview with me. I'm really looking forward to engaging you in a wonderful conversation.
Great. So just by way of intro, I guess as you and I were just talking before we started, in the virtual environment, this is the third year now we're having conversations with prominent leaders in commemoration of Black History Month. We kicked it off with Dr. Hazel N. Dukes, and then a special person, as you know. And last year we had a duo, Jennifer Jones Austin and Savanti Myrick, and really was honored that you accepted the invitation because, for me, Black History Month is a very important commemoration, a learning experience. And to me, I've majored in history in college, but the reason I chose history rather than political science, everybody thought I was going to do political science, because history looks at the individuals that make a difference. And you're certainly an individual who has made and continues to make a great difference. And no surprise through the schools and in the workplace, we salute great leaders, Langston Hughes, Sojourner Truth, Harriet Tubman, Frederick Douglass, A. Philip Randolph, Shirley Chisholm. We're going to talk about your connection there, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and more recent great leaders we've lost in the not too distant past, Al Vann, a colleague of yours from Brooklyn, David Dinkins. So, and currently, right, we're going to kick it off by talking about Caucus Weekend, but you just look at New York State and the differences, from when both of us started. Senate Majority Leader Andrea Stewart Cousins, Speaker of the Assembly Carl Hastie, Assembly Majority Leader Crystal Peoples-Stokes, Lieutenant Governor Antonio Delgado, and Brooklyn again in the House, our great Attorney General Tish James. I mean, the impact of Black leadership through the electoral process has been incredible. And obviously at the national level, again, Brooklyn, Hakeem Jeffries, your colleague and close friend and partner, now House Democratic leader, and obviously we all hope soon to be Speaker of the House. So by way of intro, for maybe the one person out there that is not familiar with your background, let me do this and then we'll get into the conversation. My guest is Congresswoman Yvette D. Clarke, represents the 9th Congressional District in Brooklyn. All roads lead to or from Brooklyn, as we know. Congresswoman Clarke is the proud daughter of Jamaican immigrants. Prior to being elected to Congress, Representative Clarke served on New York City's council, representing the 40th District, where she succeeded her pioneering mother, former City Council member, current CUNY trustee, all-around incredible person, Dr. Una Clarke. Representative Clarke is a senior member of both the House Energy and Commerce Committee and the House Committee on Homeland Security. She's been a member of the Congressional Black Caucus since coming to Congress back in 2007. She chairs the caucus's Immigration Task Force. Representative Clarke is co-chair of the Smart Cities Caucus and co-chair of the Multicultural Media Caucus, which she formed to address diversity and inclusion issues in the media, telecom industry, and tech industry. She's one of the co-chairs of the Congressional Caucus on Black Women and Girls, which develops programs to support the aspiration of Black women of all ages. And she also co-chairs the Congressional Caribbean Caucus, working to foster relationships between the United States and the Caribbean community. That is a very busy member of the House of Representatives. So again, welcome, Congresswoman Clarke. And let me start with this observation and question. The theme for Black History Month this year is Black resistance. And you and I were at the Black, Puerto Rican, Hispanic, and Asian Caucus, and so many great activities. But you were the keynoter and one of the honored guests at the Westchester Black Women's Political Caucus breakfast. And you were very clear and very direct in terms of the issues that you're confronting in Washington these days. And I think that theme of Black resistance very much fit in with your comments. I thought maybe you could share with our audience, maybe kicking off with your very strong concerns about where we're at with voting rights in our country. I think that was such a meaningful part of your wonderful address, and I thought that might be a good place to start our conversation. So enough from me. I turn it over to you.
Well, again, let me thank you for just taking this moment to highlight me during Black History Month. And you're absolutely correct, Mr. Comptroller. When we think about the core of our democracy, voting rights is the instrument that makes our democracy strong, that makes the United States of America a beacon of hope to people around the globe. And when you think about the regression that we're witnessing with respect to the value of that vote and who is able to exercise it freely in our country, we are seeing a regression that will not bode well for the future of this nation if we don't stand up and resist those within our society who desire to strip that right, uh, inhibit that right from its citizenry. I think about the fact that it was only uh, 56 years ago that the battle was waged in the United States of America to make sure that everyone had the right to vote. Most notably, we think about, of course, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and the movement in Selma, Alabama, with my departed and beloved colleague, John Lewis.
Mm.
The challenges that they face in confronting the power structure to really enable every American, Black Americans in particular in the South, to exercise their franchise freely and uninhibited. And here we are in 2023, and we see across the nation, particularly in the South, the obstacles that are being placed in the way of everyday Americans just seeking to exercise their right to vote. So it is critical that all of us become evangelistic, if you will,
Mm.
about the right to vote, that we push back, that we undergird those who are in the battle to unpack and unwind these very draconian measures that are being utilized to suppress the vote in the United States of America. If you are a citizen, whether naturalized or born citizen to the United States of America, you have a voice in a democracy, and that voice is being able to cast your ballot.
It's got to be frustrating, given your long involvement in the political process, to see the courts, to see state legislatures, obviously a change in the House of Representatives. As you point out, I mean, the Voting Rights Act going back to the 60s, that was hailed as a major step forward. It seems like we're fighting old battles today that just should not be. But that's where having strong leaders like you is very, very important. And I was impressed. I'm just curious about your thoughts. Caucus Weekend, I think, had the biggest turnout since pre-pandemic. I had the sense folks are very motivated and very committed to working on not just the voting rights agenda, but on all the issues that are out there, especially when you consider the impact of COVID on Black and Brown communities. Some communities that were behind before COVID fell further behind after COVID. What inspiration did you draw from the gathering of Caucus Weekend this month?
Yes, it is very evident that, we are in a very pivotal moment in our society. Coming out of COVID, so much was revealed to our nation about the social status, the health status of communities of color, of the Black community in particular. And as a result of that, there is sort of an awakening and a consciousness of the fact that we need to do better in providing pathways and corridors for people to live their best lives in our society. That is part of democracy. It's the freedom to exercise your talent, your skill, your ability to strengthen our nation, strengthen our communities and our families. And we have the ability to do that if we're willing to do so.
Yeah.
And what we have witnessed during the pandemic and subsequently after is that the American people recognize that we cannot miss this moment to rectify uh, many of the injustices that we've struggled with for generations now. Whether it's the right to quality health care, the right to a quality education for our children, the right to have access to opportunities in entrepreneurship and in employment. There's so many ways that I think there was a coming together and a recognition that this is a moment where we must pivot as a society to provide for those in our society who have been marginalized, who have been undervalued, and we have the ability to do that. The question is, do we have the political will to make that happen? And I think that's what you saw in the coming together of many of the people from across our state, from upstate, downstate, and every place in between. It's that passion for service, that passion for advocacy, that would encourage and undergird the members of the Black, Puerto Rican, Hispanic, and Asian caucus in Albany to do the type of legislating that creates the possibilities, creates the opportunities for all of us to enjoy and to flourish in New York State.
Yeah, so important, especially this time of year, because the state budget is being worked on. So priorities are reflected, as you know, in budget, federal and state. Also, I don't think I had a chance to mention to you when we were together, we had on Friday going into caucus weekend, our 16th Emerging Manager MWBE conference with the pension fund. And I'm very proud of the fact that I know your service on the Commerce Committee and involved with tech sector. Our pension fund now is up to $32 billion of investments with minority and women-owned firms, investment firms that are getting good results for our pension fund, but also creating greater opportunity and wealth creation. So we're proud that we could lead into caucus weekend with that. You mentioned.
And let me just say on that note, you're to be commended, Mr. Comptroller. You've raised the bar. You've heard the clarion call, and you've recognized what we've all known is that the talent to manage pension funds is not limited based on race or ethnicity or background, but the talent resides in all of us as New Yorkers who have really honed our craft, particularly in the financial services. And you were able to navigate that in a way in which it will yield dividends, not only for our pensioners, but for communities that have been long denied access and opportunity. So you're to be commended. And again, you are raising the bar, not only here in the state of New York, but for our nation as we look at the inequities that have existed for far too long.
Yeah. No, thank you for your support of our efforts. Appreciate it. And more work for us to do. I want to ask something on a more personal note. You mentioned passion and the need for strong commitment. As I mentioned earlier, your mom is one of those New York legends, Dr. Yvette Clarke, and trailblazer in her own right, being elected to city council. You succeeded her, I think, the first mother-daughter succession right in the city council. But tell us from a personal perspective, what was it like growing up with Yvette Clarke as your mother? How has that, maybe in ways that may not be obvious to us, how did that inform your choice of career, your focus? On top of it, though she wasn't your mother, maybe in a way a political mother, you're following the footsteps, your congressional district of Shirley Chisholm, first Black Caribbean woman elected. That's a lot on your shoulders between those two women, among others, as mentors and role models. Wow, how do you manage all that?
Well, let me say first of all that my mom, the Honorable Dr. Yvette S.T. Clarke, was a very loving mother. And that love not only helped to foster a sort of a good and strong self-image in myself and my brother, but it was extended to our greater community. We came up in the days where organizing was a way of life. And Dr. Clarke was at the tip of the spear of organizing, from our block association, being a block association president, to the PTA, or the parent teachers organizations in our public schooling. And I think that she did that as a means of navigating. My mom was born in the beautiful island nation of Jamaica. Both my parents were. And so they didn't have a roadmap here in the United States. And the only way that they felt that they could help to navigate my brother and I, who were born in the beautiful borough of Brooklyn, was to involve themselves in civic life, in the social infrastructure that would help my brother and I to achieve success, help our family to achieve success. So my mom, being the extrovert that she is, was out there working with other families, working with neighbors to create a wholesome environment, to create the village that raises the children. And while she was doing that, she didn't have the wealth to have a nanny or babysitters on a regular basis. What she had was the ability to carry her daughter along by her side. And
Mm,
so I had up and close view of the work that my mom was doing. And it was in service to others. And so when people ask about sort of the political element of our lives, that came much later in our lives. It was the service that really built the undergirding for what would ultimately be political careers. It was helping a family that might have been in distress, that needed, access to food, that needed access to information. My mom was that person that would go out and find out the information. She would make it her mission to meet our local elected officials and have access to them in their offices, and reciprocating, being of service to them in organizing, uh, fundraising opportunities. I remember my mom hosting fundraisers at our house for Assemblyman, the late, great Al Van, and so many others. I mention him because, he is an icon here in Brooklyn, and someone that you mentioned in our opening. But there were so many others who, again, my mom endeared herself to, who she helped to organize for. And then again, just everyday New Yorkers. My mom was a daycare advocate. And
mm,
so understanding that, the challenge for her, working, a working class woman, my dad, a working class man, and making sure that my brother and I had everything we needed to be successful. She saw the need for other families, early childhood education, and giving them that access while having their children in a safe space while they were at work. She was a forceful advocate in the daycare movement. And I think that a combination of all of what she did to serve her neighbors and our community ultimately elevated her into a political office. And then, my career was somewhat parallel in that I always wanted to give back to the community as well. And what I decided to do was go the nonprofit route. So I
mm,
worked at community based local nonprofit organizations, helping people on the ground, whether it was with tenant organizing, child care, advocacy. I too decided that it was best to use my talent, my skill, and my ability on the ground to help those families in my community who needed assistance in navigating our system and navigating their lives. And then it all just seemed to come together at the point at which my mom was term limited.
mm,
And the community was looking for who her successor would be. Everyone saw me by her side all the time. I was actually one of her campaign managers for her campaign. And so the pivot was Yvette can do this. And I was prepared. I was there. I was ready. It just so happened that I chose a vocation very similar to my mom's in serving the community at the community-based level, and I was ready.
Oh, that's great. That's great. I know we only have a few minutes left. A couple of things I just want to touch on quickly. I mentioned also Shirley Chisholm, first Black woman and Caribbean elected to Congress. You obviously have that strong Caribbean connection, and I know you work to foster those relationships. Just give you an update as to where U.S. Caribbean relations are at now. What more can we do to strengthen those partnerships?
Yes, I have been working very closely, particularly with our State Department and Department of Homeland Security. The challenges for the Caribbean region are numerous. Many of the Caribbean nations, particularly in the English-speaking Caribbean, are stuck in a rock between a rock and a hard place. They're what we call middle income states, in that they're wealthier than some of the more impoverished nations around the world, but not quite as developed as, say, a United States, a European Union, a Canada. And their challenge is, given their size, getting the type of investment that helps them to elevate themselves to sort of what we call first world status.
Mhm.
And so I've been working with our State Department to really look at how we can engage with our partners in the Caribbean, how we can draw investment into the region and create a win-win scenario. Because the more vulnerable the Caribbean region is, the more vulnerable we are. They are indeed our third border. And I think we're seeing that this with the migrant crisis right now, particularly with respect to the nation of Haiti, where right now, unfortunately, the system of governance has imploded.
Mm.
And, there is great suffering taking place since the assassination of their president 2 years ago, working with the administration to get their election and their electoral process back on track, looking at, from the ground up, how we engage the Haitian people and create a space where they can govern themselves once again and set up that infrastructure almost from scratch at this stage to hold elections, to reimagine their economy in a way in which it gives the people of Haiti the hope of reaching an equilibrium, if you will, of progress that takes them into the 21st century with much more safety, security, and much more opportunity for the people to live, decent and wholesome lives. So my work in Washington is focused, particularly through the Caribbean Caucus, on building stronger bonds between the United States, our economic sector, and the Caribbean region, in the hopes that we can undergird uplift in the 21st century, our closest partners and allies. Because right now, they're pretty open, and we're seeing foreign investment coming from some of our economic adversaries.
Yeah.
And, we can't at the UN chastise the region when we're not doing everything we can
Mm.
to build the bonds that would counteract some of our concerns about economic adversaries in the region.
Yeah. Very important, especially given the strong bond between New York, especially Brooklyn, and that part of the world. And listening to you, I'm reminded of what I learned from the late great Roy Hastick, who I know was a good friend and collaborated
And
with you on
mentor
these
to
issues,
me,
and mentored
absolutely.
so many of us, so many of us. Last question, and then I don't want to keep you because I know you're a busy person. So I'll throw a lot in this question. You could take it where you want. you've been in Congress for a number of years. You're a senior member. You have important leadership positions. You're the only Black woman in our New York congressional delegation, which I guess is somewhat surprising, but thank God you're there. You are at a point now, besides having important positions in your own right, your neighbor and good friend is now the leader of the Democratic conference. And yet you're in the minority now in the House of Representatives. And you've seen a change in just the whole tone of political discourse and debate, what's been happening in the House. How are you navigating all of that? How's that for a simple last question for you,
Very well. Well, well, let me say this. I really believe that the acrimony, the vitriol that we are witnessing or engaged in politically is a backlash. It's a backlash to the reality of a nation that has been evolving ever since its inception, right? And there are those who are in denial about the multicultural, multiracial nature of our nation. The people that make America great come from around the world, in every part of the world. And that has made a certain segment of our population very fearful. As a result of that, we are seeing, unfortunately, tactics utilized to suppress the reality of of who we are as a nation. And as a result of that, those same fears that are resident within those members of Congress are perpetuated by them within their constituencies. And so we're seeing a backlash. That backlash started, I believe, with the election of President Barack Obama, the first African American president of the United States of America. I saw, as a result of his election, the rise of the Tea Party, which is a precursor to some of what we're witnessing in Washington right now. We saw of course, election of Donald Trump, who unfortunately fomented a lot of the acrimony that we're experiencing and created a space for what I call white supremacists to it's a exercise power beyond beyond their numbers, something that we would never have tolerated previously in society, that we fought very hard against, going back to the days of the Ku Klux Klan. And now we have to, as a society, make a determination about direction. And I think that with the Democrats in the House, we've made that determination. When you look at the State of the Union, you look at one side of the aisle, the Republican Party, and it looks pretty stale, pale, and male over there. But then you look over at the Democratic side of the House, and you see a true reflection of who we are as America, the great diversity of who we are as Americans. And that is the future of our nation. And I think that we will get through this period. It's a period of transition, a time of reckoning. And we are working very hard. I am working very hard on behalf of the people of the 9th District of New York to get the breakthrough on those issues that reflect the dreams, the desires, aspirations of all who call this nation their home. And I'm working alongside some brilliant members of Congress, and of course, extremely proud of my neighboring colleague, Congressman Hakeem Jeffries, who is a human manifestation of those dreams, those aspirations of many Americans. And I would say the majority of Americans. And that's how he was able to garner a unanimous support for his leadership within the body. And we're excited about what Hakeem Jeffries' leadership will mean in the days, the weeks, the months, and the years to come.
That's great. Well, that's an optimistic punctuation to our conversation. And I should mention, as a former member of the Assembly, Hakeem Jeffries was in the State Assembly. And what I didn't remember when you spoke at the Westchester breakfast, you worked for my colleague, Barbara Clarke. Barbara and I were elected the same year to the Assembly. I'd forgotten you have Assembly roots also. So
I do. I was a
things come
staffer.
from Brooklyn and from the Assembly.
Absolutely.
Well, we could go on and on, but I know we can't. We don't have time. But Congresswoman Yvette D. Clarke, thank you for your leadership, for your strength, for even in a time of incredible challenge and a lot of negativity, you stay positive and you stay focused. We are all so glad you are in the position that you are in with your seniority and your dedication to all these issues. From my perspective, you're just doing more and more as each year goes by. So on a personal level, I thank you for your friendship and our working relationship over many years. But I can't think of a better conversation for us to have in 2023 and marking Black History Month than honoring someone through this conversation who is making history today. And that is you, Member of Congress, Yvette D. Clarke. Thank you so much for taking time to be with us.
Thank you for having me, Tom.
And give your mom my best.
Will do. Will do.
Thanks, everyone, for watching.